previous meeting taking place, not actually a meeting, but a Holocaust memorial, and a number of the members of this particular meeting, Peter's joined us, will have been at the meeting and maybe a couple of minutes late, but we will obviously let them in as and when they are available. Can I at this point welcome Jamie MacArthur and Caroline Webb from Bellway, who will be coming in at one of the later points, point 6. Okay, can I ask, I know that Neil is going to be, he's going to be taking notes of this particular meeting. Will Neil or will Alan be able to tell us on any apologies for absence? I don't think we have any, apart from the fact that Jeremy's a little delayed.
I can do that, Chairman, and you're quite correct. Everybody's here apart from the leader, who will be joining us shortly.
Absolutely fine. Do we have any declarations of interest at all?
Nothing.
No, I see none.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we go to point 3, which is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Strategic Housing Board held on the 14th of October 2020 and matters arising. Can I just first take confirmation of the minutes? Are we all happy with that? I see no one indicating otherwise. How about you, Tom? You've always got something.
Agree.
No, I can't. I wasn't there, unfortunately, so I can't second them.
Of course.
But they look good. They look good.
The only matter arising from that I just want to comment on is, in fact, it's actually item 35, which came under data next meeting, when we were suggesting that we actually have somebody from the lending world to talk to us about first-time buyers. Unfortunately, the Financial Services Association, FSA, weren't able to provide us with anybody, and unfortunately we started running out of time. But it is wonderful to see that our friends from Bellway have joined us, and so we've adapted that particular agenda item so that they can help us and help us understand some of the issues around the market at the moment and how they are actually dealing with that. So that was my only comment on point 3. Are you okay with that, Neil? You can stick a thumb up if you are, or any other part of your anatomy. I think he has. Okay, are there any urgent items?
When there are no urgent items, but could I just perhaps take this opportunity to remind everybody that this is a live public meeting and that we are being live streamed on YouTube.
Excellent. So if you haven't combed your hair and cleaned your teeth before now, it's too late. Okay, references from other committees?
There are none, Chairman.
Excellent. In that case, we will open the floor to our friends from Bellway Homes. Thank you both for coming along and joining us today. You are, in fact, one of, everyone's, sorry. Suddenly, everyone's pictures suddenly disappeared. Can everyone still see me? Oh, all coming back in.
Yes.
It's obviously the effect you have on us, Jamie. It's very depressing. Thank you very much for coming along. We thought it'd be relevant to actually have somebody from the world of development to come along, and in the fact that Bellway are one of the main developers actually around the Dartford area. We thought it would be nice if you were able to tell us about some of the marketing activities that your company is at the moment involved in. In particular, one of the references for this particular board is to help local people buy or live in homes actually in Dartford. So I know we've talked about this in the past, but I wondered if you or Caroline can go, Caroline, sorry, can let us know what you're doing, because forgive me, I'm talking too much, but in the past,
yeah, definitely,
when you've wanted to actually promote development that you are actually doing in Dartford, you haven't been able to do it very easily because you had no established sales centre. Mm-hmm. You do now. So I will now shut up and leave you to let us know what you're up to. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, David. No, thank you for inviting us to start with. It's a pleasure to be invited to this, and obviously we do have a lot going on in the borough. A quick tally update of what we currently got live. It's probably 1,000 units coming forward in the next probably live sites now at obviously Lowfield Street, We've got Craylands and Croxton and Gary over at within the sort of Ebbsfleet boundary. And then we've got Crossways, which, came to committee in December, which is for another 258 units, which will, bring us up to almost probably 1,300 units by the time we finish this year. So there's a lot going on. We probably had these sort of conversations about how we attract people from Dartford to obviously buy, Bellway and obviously, the new build over a year ago. And we started that with Lowfield Street. And we did a bit of a pilot scheme where we had an event down at the football club. And we did some sort of marketing in the local press. And essentially sort of arrived from that, really. It's sort of been, and that's what we're developing. And Crossways was the first sort of scheme where we've committed to, as part of the 106 agreement, to say, we will have a marketing period where, we basically aim at local people. And there's lots of points of how you do that. There's lots of things that we need to overcome, and there's lots of things that I'm sure you guys can help us having all that local knowledge and experience. So if I hand over to Carolyn to sort of explain a bit about the sales and marketing strategies, and then we can take any questions, really.
Yeah, hi everyone, nice to meet you all. Just going on what Jamie was saying, we did obviously launch, weirdly enough, a year ago now at Copper House. That was our actual launch on Lowfield Street, which was very, very busy, big marquee and everything. And what we did a week prior to that is we advertised in the local Dartford papers about the football club. And I was very surprised at how many people actually came down. And I think what someone actually told us on the event was that you've got a Dartford Facebook page, like some kind of community Dartford page. And someone had actually taken a photo of the newspaper, put it on your Facebook page, and then everyone had come down. So it actually did us a really big favour. We got a lot of inquiries via that. Touching again on Facebook itself, we have got adverts now in social media, which we started to use, which actually homes in on the Dartford area. And we find that quite successful, especially for this development, because we get a lot of first-time buyers and a lot of younger couples as well. A lot of the Help to Buy purchasers all come from that sort of social media side too. But we also do a bigger sort of campaign as well. So we do like a group campaign that shows like London boroughs, and Copper House actually comes in under that as well, because obviously it's Bellway London that we advertise as. And then on top of that, we do all of our own advertising on our website. We have Rightmove campaigns, we have Zoopla campaigns, we have database campaigns that go out to everybody, and then we run sort of adverts and offers as well. I mean, it's a very good location. So obviously, if you can see where the Copper House development is, it's very big. It runs all the way down the road and all the way through by the high street. So there's a lot of advertising on the hoarding as well. So we get a lot of people in fresh from the signs. Personally, I'd like to see a few more signs maybe come up in the high street, or directional signs maybe around there that we could sort of direct people from the high street to the development. But yeah, we've got a lot of things going on the development itself. A lot of downsizers as well. People that come in, that have big houses that are downsizing now. So it's a sort of a varied sort of selection of people that actually buy on the development too. Again, Ebbsfleet, very, very busy, and so are all the surrounding areas too. So yeah, a lot going on really.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I think we've actually met. I popped up
we
to
did.
the yes, we've met. I popped up to the London Bridge launch with all the sites, which is a very impressive exercise. It would be wonderful to see similarly impressive exercises, obviously, out of your offices down in Dartford in the future. Thank you very much for that. It's very interesting to see. I think it was probably me that put the thing on social media, so sorry. But, that's fine. I think but it's obviously important to us in Dartford. We are often accused of too much development going on in Dartford. I personally don't believe in that. But one of the things that we need really to emphasise to the people of Dartford is that a lot of this development is to their benefit. And unfortunately, a lot of them feel that brand new is not something that they can aspire to, let alone afford. And I'm wondering whether there's any way that you can actually help some of these people actually dispel some of these myths, and maybe even just encourage them in for a financial health check to see whether or not they are. Because I think you've had some indicative situations down at, I hate to use Ebbsfleet Cross, which is actually in Swanscombe. Ebbsfleet Cross, where people have just come in and then they found that there are opportunities for them to buy on that development. Is that
We
the case?
have, yeah. Very one that really does stand in my mind is when we had the launch at Ebbsfleet Cross as well, and we had a few people that came in thinking they could only afford an apartment, and we were able to actually upgrade them to a house because they didn't realise that the Help to Buy scheme is obviously aimed at people in this instance, where you get the 20% loan from the government on the Help to Buy scheme. You only need the 5% deposit. And people don't seem to realise all the different schemes that are in place. You know, we could also help if you didn't want to use a Help to Buy scheme. You know, there's things in place that we can give you money towards a deposit or other items. You know, stamp duty paid. I know at the moment it's very good that the government are doing the stamp duty paid, but you know, some people haven't got the extra little things that they can't afford, and we can help them as a developer. But the Help to Buy scheme is extremely beneficial. It's been so good for us, especially all your areas. Most of our Copper House sales are all from the Help to Buy scheme. People don't seem to realise, you know, they come in thinking they can only afford a 1-bed, but actually because of the Help to Buy scheme, they can afford a 2-bed, and they're just ecstatic, you know. And the good thing about buying new, which is really good, is that you pick what colour kitchen you want, you pick what colour carpets you want, you know, you pick everything, you pick which plot you're going to go for, and it's such an exciting experience. You know, it's so nice to see all the first-time buyers coming in, and they don't realise they can afford it, and you know, it's really good. And because we're there, we're in-house every single step of the way. We're there doing progression with you. We're there explaining what the legal process is. We're there constantly. So we're just not, you know, sometimes when you're buying a house, you haven't got that middle person. You're the one that's doing it all, whereas we do it all for you. So we explain everything. We explain the schemes. You know, we've got a company called New Homes Mortgage Helpline that will explain everything to you and all that. So we don't speak about your financial situation. You'll speak to this mortgage, the mortgage broker, and then they'll give us a reference number, and it says, yes, you can proceed, and what amount you can proceed to. So it's even just that service there is free. You can just phone up and get that with us at any time. You don't have to be reserving to do that, just so you get an idea of what you can or can't afford. So I don't think people seem to really understand that we've got the whole sort of package there as well.
Before I jump in, does anybody else on the board have any questions of either Caroline or Carolina or Jamie at all? No, excellent. Well,
yes, please, David. I wanted to ask
about
occupancy and or anticipated date of occupancy. Are some occupied already, or when do you anticipate that to take?
So none are occupied as yet. We've got our first block, which is Labatt House, which will be completing in the summer, this summer, which is July, so July and August. We have got some one-beds available.
Are we talking about Central Dartford now?
Yeah, in Copper House, yeah. Dartford, the Dartford development. So at the Dartford development, we have Labatt House coming up July, August. Then we have the following blocks will be the end of the year and then beginning of next year. There will be our first completions there. In Ebbsfleet, we already have had our first move-ins, which were December. We've got them in for Christmas. And we have got more moving in this week and next week. So there are our first lot of occupancies at Ebbsfleet, Ebbsfleet Cross. So that'll be moving across the year now. Everyone will be moving into Ebbsfleet as well. Crossways isn't open as yet.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Caroline, one of the things that springs to my mind is a question of education. One of the things that we are looking at here as a board is a way of actually educating people around Dartford as to what they can do when looking for property, depending entirely on their particular status. So is there something that you're doing? Can I just take this opportunity to welcome Jeremy to the meeting?
It's all right, don't get up.
No, I daren't, because I don't tend to wear trousers in these meetings. But can I just ask the question of education? So is there anything that Bellway are doing in order to educate the people in the areas in which they are building as to the opportunities that might be coming their way in the near future?
I mean, on our website, we do list all the different schemes that we run, and there is an explanation on how they work. And you'll find that all the adverts that we send out, if there's a launch email or anything to do with that, they will always put an example on the bottom of all of our adverts. So if it's a Help to Buy scheme, we'll explain an example of, you know, if the property costs this amount, and then we'll explain the different types, you know, what the loan amount will be, what your deposit will be. And it does actually explain on there, but mainly on our website initially, until obviously we're open. Once we're open, at any point you can ring our offices, which are open 7 days a week. and get any kind of information you want, or via email. So it's quite readily available. But like I say, in the first instance, it would be on our website. I mean, it would be handy if we could have access, like if you had on your website to put something on there too, that would be great. You know, any opportunity we can to put the message out there would be perfect.
Strange enough, one of the criticisms we got when we started actually trying to direct people to your sales centres, that we were acting as your sales team. The fact was that we were really just trying to encourage people in Dartford to actually find the opportunities that are available to them. So obviously we have to tread reasonably carefully in that respect, because perception is reality in some cases. That's fantastic, and I do appreciate your coming to our meeting. Is there any other questions from anyone else on the board before we let our friends from Bellway take a back seat?
Chairman, Councillor Madison and Mr. Dossad were indicating that they wish to speak.
Can I take Councillor Madison first then, please, and then I'll come on to Mr. Dossad afterwards.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just I wondered whether there was a set amount of the properties that are being built by Bellway that are up for purchase under the Help to Buy scheme, whether there's a sort of cut-off point. Say you said that there's 1,000 homes coming on sale in the next, you know, some are already on sale already, but over the next year or two. Is there a sort of set amount that once you've reached 100 units on Help to Buy, that's it? Because when we had the bridge development some years ago, we had a special scheme for local people, and it was quite difficult at times to go across to the developer and see what was being. We had a situation where I think we got up to 20%, if not 40% on occasions, to help people buy from the local community, like Dartford people. And it transpired every time people went over there, it's, oh, they're not up for sale yet, those ones. You'll have to come back and see us. Like, it's almost as if there was a limited amount and that was it. Like, you know, you had to be very lucky.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Help to Buy is that it is a government-run scheme. So it's not a developer scheme. It is actually a government-backed scheme. The loan money comes from the actual Help to Buy agencies, which is the government. The way it works is the property needs to be built within a 9-month period. So from the day you reserve, the property that you have must be within the 9-month period that the loan amount or the application is within. So anything that we're building a year and a half ahead, you can't have the scheme on. So you must have that 9-month period that the property must be built within for you to be able to apply for the scheme. Now, obviously, the whole of one of our blocks at Copper House is all Help to Buy because it's in summer. And we're now just approaching our next block, which is at the end of the year. So all of that will then become Help to Buy. So that's how it works. It's a time-sensitive scheme. Also, in other areas, it's actually a budget scheme. So I think now the new Help to Buy scheme, there's a cap of like about 400k. So anything under 400k, you can go for Help to Buy scheme. Anything over in this area, you can't. So that's how it works. There are just certain stipulations, but in actual fact, on our website, we are plot specific and we say if it's got Help to Buy against it or not. Also, if you obviously contact the development, they can explain to you which ones, you know, it's all block sensitive. So that's how it basically works.
There must be some way, Caroline, we can flag this up by the council, so we don't appear to be your marketing agent, but giving information to local people, so they do know that they are successful. You know, that they're not disappointed by it all.
No.
Okay. So, are you happy with that, Tom?
Yes, yeah, I think you can see where I'm coming from, David. I'm sure Jeremy can, and that, you know, but it's you want an offer out there that people should get their hands on. You know?
We can all see where you're coming from, Tom.
Absolutely. Miles in advance. Mr. Dossad, did you have a question?
More of a comment, really, Chairman. I think you've kind of picked up the bulk of it. But I think one of the early conversations we had, I think you used the example of your daughter, not someone in your daughter's position wouldn't necessarily understand that these products exist. Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yes,
I wonder what role we've got as a council in terms of, you know, raising that awareness. And I appreciate, you know, the commercial relationship or not having one with Bellway as a council, but equally, you know, the other developers are selling similar products. But I think it's definitely a piece of work for us to raise that awareness, you know, where and if we can, for those kind of people that wouldn't necessarily look to the council for advice, even let alone assistance. You know, and it's really reassuring, I think, that, you know, the Bellway's clients are able to access Help to Buy, because we wouldn't necessarily know a lot of this stuff. And as a housing provider, it's all part of the bigger picture. So it sounds really positive. I do think there's some awareness work we could probably do if we really thought about it. And I think your mosaic, which we'll talk about, probably go quite a long way to helping that if we can get that off the ground.
I mean, if I could just comment, if I can just comment, I'd love, and what we've done in the past is we've done stands at Blue Water. I mean, obviously this is before COVID, you know, we've set up stands at Blue Water and the like, and we've had like a little information stand with our staff on a weekend, actually advising people what's in the local area and things like that. And it's actually worked really well, just to, people don't, you know, they're out shopping, they don't really think about that. And you've got someone actually standing there in the Bellway uniform explaining, look, here's our brochure for this place, here's our brochure for that. And things like that really works. Actually having like a presence somewhere does actually help. I know, like, obviously in the situation we've got at the moment, it's a bit awkward because of the COVID, but we've run events and stuff before where we've had like an open day, just not in for selling, you know, we've just put on a barbecue and, you know, someone there painting faces and all that for the kids, and we're literally just handing out information, and it does actually really work. And that's when we invite solicitors and brokers down as well to actually help out. So something like that, when we're able to, working with you guys would be fantastic. I mean, especially by the park and everything, we're in like such a good location, it'd be perfect. So I'm so keen to sort of get the council on board and help with stuff and get it messaged out there. It's brilliant. So just,
well, Chairman, would you mind? I'm not at all. I wasn't at all keen to do those kind of things until you mentioned the word barbecue, and I've now just completely changed my mind. I think it's fantastic. Let's get in there.
You know, as soon as they said barbecue, I thought Jeremy's going to be interested in this one. That's perfect, Caroline. I think that's wonderful. It should be recognised, the fact that the Dartford Council website does actually carry information on various aspects of housing products, like Help to Buy and things like this. I think it does. Our problem really is getting people to realise that's where they go. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of situations are where people don't realise that the council has a plethora of information available to them, but they don't realise it's actually on our website. So it is something that, again, the whole question of education and getting people to come along. And I think that, you know, if we can look into the possibilities of linking with your good selves at Bellway, and in fact the other house builders that are coming into our area, F Street seems to be a bit sort of on the side, but they are still part of Dartford. So, you know, it's still a part of our larger world. I have nothing more on this particular question. Oh, what? No, I have. I've got just two questions. One is service charges, which is an interesting one, and it just comes to hand because somebody mentioned to me the other day that they were looking to buy somewhere, but they hadn't taken into consideration the fact that there were service charges on houses. They'd always assumed that there were service charges on blocks of flats because that's what's always been there. But there does seem to be now, and it's something that we recognise, developments which are solely houses rather, they also seem to have service charges now. And the question they asked me, which I couldn't answer, is why?
Okay, so I mean, generally on developments like ours, for instance, you'll have things like the parking areas that will be block paved, or they'll be lit up, or there'll be street lighting. There'll be lots of green areas or communal like garden areas as well that will be maintained. So there is like a minimal charge that the management company will come in and they'll do everything on the development. So, you know, road work, just anything like that. It's minimal. You're probably talking maybe, I mean, it's all different depending where the developments are, but you maybe like 250 a year or 300 a year. It really does depend on the development. But yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the reservation process, everyone's informed of the management fee, and you can at any point have a full list of everything that's included and what it's included for. So there's like a fund in place for anything that could go wrong on the development too. So it's quite comprehensive, and even with apartments, we tell everyone upfront what the cost will be, and it's actually put onto your reservation form. So it's an upfront cost that's advised. But then when you actually go to get qualified with your broker, as I was saying about the New Homes Mortgage Helpline people that we use, they'll actually factor that in as part of your costs, so they'll know what the management charge is and they'll factor that in. So
I only asked one of the I would have loved to have been a president, was the fact that Dartford Borough Council, as part of their planning many years ago when it came to Ingress Park, encouraged a management group which consisted of both developers, local councillors, and more importantly residents. So they had some sort of into what is what is the money spent on, which is something that seems to be woefully absent at places like Ebbsfleet at the moment, where people just rail against the fact they've got new bills come through and they've got no way of actually getting involved in how those things are actually put out. But that's just an aside. And it's just, we have had service charges in Dartford for a long time, but I have to say that Ingress Park has been, well, it's been managed particularly well in the past. It's questionable, but at least it is there.
Would you mind if I come in, Chairman, on that subject? Because although it's one of those big issues for people, but not necessarily for councils. We've got no statutory responsibility, of course, once these developments are up and running. But I'm always astonished at how developers, very, very good developers, will spend millions of pounds effectively developing great schemes and promoting them as wonderful places to live. And then they will hand them over to management companies that simply let them down. And I'm always astonished by that. And I'm not suggesting that Bellway's one will, but I'm suggesting that the history is that management companies obviously have a record of being very unpopular with residents. And I think developers need to work on that and try and find a formula that will effectively create a popular management company, perhaps by capping the profits available, or perhaps by capping the tariffs, or taking a longer term approach to it. I say that though, and the reason it slipped off my agenda is I think the government are going to step in actually, and I think the government are not too far away from democratizing management companies, and will insist upon them being effectively democratically elected bodies within the framework. So but it's an interesting concept. I'm not being personal about Bellway, because I've no idea. I'm sure your management companies are very good, but I've seen an awful lot of very, very good developers hand their wonderful estates on to very poor management companies, and it makes you wonder why they do it. Well, I think I know why they do it, but it makes you wonder whether it's a good decision.
It is absolutely right, and I think my colleague Councillor Nicklin down in Ebbsfleet has an absolute nightmare, because he has so many people complaining to him about the management company, which he has no control over whatsoever. All he can do is go in and negotiate. So it's just not a warning shot. It's just a word of advice that these things can actually have and the trouble is that the people living in the houses don't necessarily blame the management company. They blame the person who sold them the house. And that's where, unfortunately, very good reputations can be undermined by very poor management company. Yes, but that's outside the remit of us. So we'll move on. Does anybody else have anything else they would like to ask either Jamie or Carolyn? No. Guys, thank you so much for coming. This is a public meeting, so you can, by all means, you can stay and watch the rest of the meeting, or leave as is your want.
Chairman, I didn't realise Jamie was on here. I'm only seeing half the number of people. I bet he's really pissed off now I've mentioned about management companies, but I'm sure he's taken it on board.
No, we've had quite a few discussions with yourselves previously on it, and it's something we're always conscious of. And when we talk about the design of the schemes, when we're even at planning stage, the maintenance, the management, we always think about those long-term impacts. If we put something in which is going to cost 100 grand to replace, we know that we will get that grief down the line. So it's very important. The design of the scheme is crucial to how it then gets managed. So
the issue, of course, James, is if you've got a long-term presence in a town, what happens is, of course, the residents in one area start to campaign in the other, don't they? And effectively they deter sales. And so it's all right if you're hit and running, but Bellway can't really afford to do that because it's got too many sites. So it's in everyone's interest to make sure that one part of Dartford's got a good management company, so when you come to sell the next part, the word gets around, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, and I do look forward to further cooperation between the council and Bellway. I'm sure there's opportunities for both of us, and I say both of us, I mean for linking in with our local communities and ensuring that local people are better informed about the ways they can actually purchase property, be it brand new, perhaps stuff that, as I say, they haven't aspired to in the past because they thought they simply couldn't. So that's something I think we can all work on. So thank you very much indeed. It's been wonderful seeing you both. Thanks for spending the time with us. And if you stay on, I hope you find the rest of the meeting as interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
I have to leave, unfortunately, but have a good day. Take care, and we'll speak soon on Crossways anyway. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Excellent. Right. Yep, they've got right. So we will now move on to item 7, which is Dartford Street has a mosaic update. Jackie, would you mind if I led off on this, and then maybe you could join in as well?
That's fine, David. I expected you to lead anyway.
You what?
Thank
You what?
Careful. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We actually, one of the attachments to our papers today was actually the mosaic as it stands at the moment. Now, I know that it's probably a little small for people to read. I'm not having a go at you, Jeremy, but it is quite a small document when it comes to the actual writing on it. But the objective of this particular exercise today is to actually have a look at this mosaic. And the way you're looking at it is it's like battleships. The X column is all about what we are, and the Y row at the very bottom is what is our housing status. And the idea is you identify what you are, and then you find what your housing status is, and then by cross-referencing the two, you will find the piece of advice that you need to take you to an appropriate person or organisation. This really was an exercise for us to, one, identify all the different types of people are out there, all the different housing status, making sure that it tied in with the local plan, because local plan had described certain housing groups as well. It does do that. Ultimately, this is only a way of identifying how we would take this forward. It's not meant to be a document that we hand out, although we certainly could if we wanted to. We could put it into a leaflet. But the idea is to put together some sort of interactive link to our websites so that people who are in a certain position can identify who they should be going to next. And of course, being if we put it online, it would offer us the opportunity to actually embed links into this as well. So we could actually click on it and you'd go to the appropriate party. I'm not suggesting that at this meeting we would sign this off, but I would ask people to take this document away. And if they haven't already, and forgive me if you have a look at this and say, identify by, I don't know, the beginning of next month, if there are areas they feel are incorrect, so that we can amend this and then decide what we're going to do with it next. Because what we do with it next really is, do we make it into a printed item? Fine, that's okay, but I'm a bit Christian about that. Or do we find a way to get our own IT people to develop this and create a attachment to our existing website? Can I hand that out to everyone? Has anybody got any comments? Deafening silence.
I think
well, if no one else is speaking, I will. I'm sorry, Tom. We came in together. I'll let you in, Tom. Go on, Tom.
all it was it would be helpful if we could enlarge it a bit. I must admit, even with a magnifying glass, I'm having trouble reading it through, but it would.
We'll get that sorted and we'll get it circulated. Jackie can deal with that. We'll get a big version sent out.
Thanks very much. That'd be very helpful. Thank you, Jeremy.
And rather than me sort of come up with individual little cells that might be wrong, I think we need to nuance it a little bit. I mean, when I read through it, one of the things I think I spotted was that if you were a qualifying ex-service person who had a mortgage arrangement to upsize, the advice was talk to your mortgage advisor. Well, if you've done that, if you've got a mortgage arrangement, then you should be talking to estate agents, shouldn't you? So, I mean, I think it just needs to be a little more nuanced. If I went to a mortgage advisor who's just sold me a mortgage to upsize, they're not going to advise me on how to get a property, are they? I wouldn't have thought. I mean, the advice is surely going to come from the market and the developer, isn't it, or the estate agent? But it's just a small point. I mean, perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but
Well, I'm looking at this. Sorry, it's qualifying ex-service personnel.
Yeah, go along to, for example, upsizer with mortgage arrangements in place. Yeah.
And then it says registered.
Oh, I see. It says registered estate agent. Okay, in that case, I'm sorry, I've got it all wrong. It's part of these small letters. I've displaced it by one cell. That's fine. Okay, well, I'll take it all back then.
I must remember to play battleships with you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll take it all back then. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely fine. But having said that is where this is quite important, because you're quite correct. Because if that was the situation, it would have been the wrong point of information. Yeah. So that's what really needs to be looked at in a sort of micro aspect to make sure that we have actually put the right points of contact in there. And you know, the trouble is that we couldn't identify a house builder. We'd have to say house builders.
Yeah.
But it would at least give them the opportunity to identify where they should be going to next.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, Chairman, is that one of the things we've done, for example, on the utilities, as you know, we now sort of do this utility swap thing where we invite people to bid against interested parties. That seems to be proof of concept, really, that actually there's nothing to stop developers bidding against people who ask us to define them in a box, if it were. So in other words, if Bellway wanted to, I don't see any particular reason why they couldn't come to us and say, with the permission of the person, of course, you know, those people who've actually registered on our system, as it whatever it is, and says, yeah, I am a first-time buyer with a mortgage in place. You know, there's nothing to stop a developer, I don't think, coming to us and us passing that information on. But obviously, I appreciate it's a highly regulated area. Have to be incredibly careful, but it might be worth just exploring. So none of us wants this to be a dead-end job, do we? We want it to be kind of helpful for the end user, you know.
I can feel Mrs. Green in the background, making sure that we're treading on a very, very tight right. But can I therefore, I don't want to leave this because it's been drifting for a long time. To be honest with you, this document was actually prepared at the beginning of last year, but obviously we had situations with COVID, etc., which has delayed it. Please, could I ask people to look at this? But I would also ask advice at this meeting. If, in fact, we now have this document and everyone is happy with the mosaic as it stands at the moment, I don't understand, I do not know what the next step would be. Do we take it to Paul Blake to say, look, here we are, this is what we've got. How do we take this forward to make sure that people are aware of it? Because two things. One, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is the fact that if we put this onto our website very successfully, we have then got to think about some sort of promotional campaign to make sure people know it's there so they can find it. We'll take one step at a time. How do we get it onto the system? Do we go to Paul Blake with this particular document and say, look, this is what we want. I'm going to put together for you a design spec for a add-on to our existing website? Forgive my lack of understanding of these things.
Perhaps Jackie could help with this at this point.
If I could pick this up, Chair, I think once we're happy with the mosaic as it stands and taking on sort of the detail that the leader has mentioned, just double check it. I think the next step is for us to talk to our IT team, probably Rob Moore, I would suggest, and see if we can get something in test.
Yes.
And I think then what we'd like to do is run some scenarios, and then for each item actually have an outcome that might link to the website. I don't know, but things like could link to Rightmove or wherever there is a developer presence, that kind of stuff. So I think the first step, if we could sort of say, if anybody's got any comments, come back to us within a week or so, and then we'll look early next month to start pulling it together from an IT perspective, test it, and then come up back to the meeting with some outcomes, if that's agreeable.
Could I just, so I'm trying to find my diary. If we would say, if nobody's come back to us by the 5th of February, we will assume that everyone is happy with the way it's laid out at the moment. And from there, we take it to the next step. Is that okay? Because I do think we need to put dates on these things so we actually do act. So anyone got a problem, let us know by the 5th. If you're not let us know by the 5th, we'll assume that you're happy and we will take it to the next step. And perhaps Peter, Jackie and I can talk about that offline, and then we can bring that back to the next meeting.
Yeah. I mean, there is a way which keeps everybody happy, Chairman. Which because I think officers are absolutely right to, you know, be careful and cautious if we start to roll out to individual developers. But once we've produced this raw data, there's nothing to stop us effectively allowing private interest to use that raw data, as long as we don't do it. I mean, let's, for example, I'm not suggesting Dartford Living are the answer or KM are the answer, but you might find that one of them is willing to actually work on that technology, so that every 6 or 8 months we feed in this data about the thing and the grid. And they use that as the basis for their app or their, and then they could actually sell advertising, and they could actually go out and it could be much more proactive. And all we're doing is basically providing some basic data. We're not providing any links to any companies or providing any direct endorsement. All we're doing is providing the basic data about where to go. And it might be that there's a private provider out there who's willing to take that on for us, you know.
I think that's eminently sensible. I think that it's certainly something to towards in the future. There are definitely organisations that we can link to here, which are government bodies, like not first-time buyers, but shared homes and things like this, which we could hopefully be able to link to with impunity. But I just want to start getting this thing moving. So I think that the stage of linking it with other outside bodies, I think is a very good idea. Let's just see what our friends in IT say about how they can build this thing first, and then we take it on and discuss that at the next meeting, perhaps. Everyone seem happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, Chairman, it's all linked to policies in a way that we've already got in place as a council with service.
There is,
you know, so we've got the sort of integral part of it ourselves, haven't we, as an authority?
We've also already got narrative around some of these different areas already on our website. So some of it will be simply a link from whatever we create into our existing website so people can find more information. There's no point reinventing the wheel if it's already there. We may have to update it a bit, but it's already there. Let's just get the links in. So we've already got an opportunity to link to things we know we're okay, outside bodies that are independent, which we hope would be okay, and then later on an opportunity with others as well who want to come out to play. Okay?
Chairman.
Thank you,
Chairman.
thank you, Mrs. Green.
And you will leave it to us to make sure that if there is any personal data involved in this, that we will do whatever is necessary to make sure that we are compliant. Because this could be quite a tricky area to navigate.
Yes.
Absolutely, Mrs. Green. I entirely agree. I would hate to trip over anything like that. No, that's absolutely fine. So, just for the minutes, Paul Neil's rattling these down out there. Folk are going to have a look at this. If they've got a problem, they come back to us by the 5th of February. If after the 5th of February there is no response, we will take it that everyone's happy with the content of the mosaic as it stands, and Peter and Jackie and I will discuss then what we're going to do, taking it into the IT arena. Is that okay?
Yes.
I think, yeah, everyone happy with that? Excellent. Okay. We'll take it. That's the cunning plan, as they say, or as Baldrick used to say. Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything else to say on this subject before we move on to item 8?
Just if they can get it out a bit larger before.
Either that or we get you a new pair of glasses, Councillor Madison, one of the two, or both, probably. Excellent. I will now, if Neil's happy, I will now take us on to item 8. I'm assuming that Mr. Dosad will be talking to this to the homeless update.
Yes, you mentioned Baldrick, and here I am. Yes, the report that members of the committee have got in front of them is a iteration of a report that went to scrutiny committee, probably in the autumn, I guess now. But this specifically targets our reaction to SWEP in a new COVID world, if you like. The report itself gives some background to what SWEP is. That's a severe weather emergency protocol. It's a bit of a mouthful. That's why we call it SWEP, which effectively we've exercised and activated a number of times over the last 3 years. Historically, SWEP was part of the Dartford Church's winter shelter arrangement, and then a very effective arrangement it was in terms of 12 beds in a different church hall various nights of the week, starting in late December and ran on till probably February, March, depending on how the weather was. But obviously in the COVID world, that meant we need a change of approach because we can't have large amounts of people in the same small enclosed space. So what we did as part of our reaction to COVID, if you like, was put together some proposals and made some bids to government, and we were very successful in obtaining some funding that's basically enabled us to procure a 7-bed HMO, and we're actively placing our emergency homeless clients and our rough sleepers in that building currently. Only the males, as the report suggests, because we make separate arrangements for females because we don't feel that's appropriate. It's been a very successful project. We've managed to only encounter, I think we've had 3 separate rough sleepers over the period of the winter thus far, and 2 of those are actively involved with our projects elsewhere, but had difficulty in retaining the opportunity to stay in the properties that we'd procured for them. Ongoing support, but they do tend to kind of reappear from time to time. And we're trying to deal with those issues, but it's been a great success. You know, the number of rough sleeper approaches has gone down significantly, and you have to say that that's because it's benefited from the government's everybody in approach over COVID. There's been a great success. You know, we've been able to access service users that really didn't want anything to do with us previously, and we've got some really positive outcomes with those rough sleepers, and the housing inclusion officer has been a big part of that. The little bit of uncertainty about what happens after April, because obviously the funding is relatively short term, but we're working quite hard as a team to make sure that we're at the front of any bidding processes that are going to come after April. But overall, we say, you know, SWEP this year has been a success in terms of being able to help those that really desperately needed it at a very difficult time. I'm happy to take any questions from the panel.
Well done.
It's by way of observation, to be honest with you, Peter. I'm one of the number of councillors who get involved with the winter shelter, so we are well aware of the good work that is done by both by Dartford and, of course, by the Dartford churches. And Dartford churches tend to keep us informed because we are volunteers of what's going on. So I was aware of a lot of the stuff that you've just come up with. But I think it should also be said, and we're not great sometimes blowing around trumpet, they are exceptionally pleased and overjoyed with the amount of support, both financially and through your offices, that they get, which is unusual. I think people don't realise that other places aren't quite as good as we are in Dartford. But it is quite remarkable. And whenever you hear people talk about homelessness, we are in a wonderful position, because the thing is that we don't just scoop them off the streets and dust them down. We actually help them move on to their next port of call, which is the essential side of things. And it's noticeable by the decreasing number of people that we are actually having to look after year. And that, I think, it just shows the success of that combined thinking and activity within the Dartford and outside Dartford Council and outside areas. So I think that's excellent. Does anybody have any questions on this? I think, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. But
I've just got a quick one, Chair, if you don't mind. Given our experience this year, Peter, I've not asked you this and I've not prepared you for this, but given that we've taken this approach this year, is it not an approach we should look at for future years? I mean, just because we can get back on the ground and start working, have we actually analysed whether this is a better approach to take in any event?
We're certainly looking to formalise the arrangement with the HMO after April. So that will go into a long-term leasing scheme, which, as you know, has been quite successful for us in other areas. But to have that asset available to us every time we approach winter will resolve the largest volume of the rough sleepers, because we will make sure we're ready. The difficulty for the council, obviously, is you have to make the tough decision that you are actually going to make those beds available, those rooms available. So there may be a bit of movement, but it's the right thing to do, and I know you're 100% supportive of that approach. And I think longer term, we're also trying to find out we don't know what's going to happen with Brexit, because obviously, well, not obviously, but as you know, a lot of the entrenched rough sleepers historically have been Eastern European. So what will happen to those cohort of people that are in the community, where they will be next winter, is a little bit unknown. So I think a combination of the two things, in terms of the fantastic job that the church does and what we're able to provide in terms of picking up the slack, we should be in a very strong position this time next year to be able to absolutely react to the smaller number of rough sleepers that approach us, because the vast majority are now in the system, and we really wasn't in this position this time last year. So I think overall it's a positive, and we're trying to be optimistic, but it's been a massive learning curve for us in terms of the ongoing support for rough sleepers, because there's always been an expectation that the home housing resolves their issue, but it doesn't. It's not just about somewhere to sleep, it's the ongoing support. So I think onwards, I think the HMO approach will be the best way to go. I think we're in a strong position that also, you know, from a financial perspective, entering a long-term lease for those units is far better for the council as well. And if we needed to do another unit of a similar size, I feel we'd be in a strong position to be able to do that effectively as well.
Thank you, Peter. I know Michael Smith and the rest of his team are particularly pleased and happy with you.
That's a fantastic job, Martin. So, you know, you have to give, you know, a lot of the plaudits to the church because their staff are fantastic.
But as a learning curve, it's something. It's a learning curve you've managed to climb, and I think it's only by working together that we've done this, and that's part of what we do.
Absolutely.
Anyone else got anything on this?
Well, just Chairman, just to say, on a positive note, I've had very positive feedback. I think basically, in a way, this is an excellent scheme that we should actually build on, because though COVID has been a sad thing, in actual fact, we have been able to concentrate people more for their ongoing needs. As you say, this isn't just about homelessness. The fact that they are now sort of shut in, they've been able to say, well, actually, what are you doing about your mental health problems? What are you doing about your drink problem or your relationship problems? And I think basically it's given us an opportunity to actually focus on those other services as well. It's not just about homelessness. So I've heard very positive feedbacks, and I think it's just such a good scheme that we shouldn't just be doing it in the winter. I mean, just because it's got warm doesn't mean we're not going to turn everybody out onto the streets, are we? So sleeping rough any time of the year is not an ideal situation, I don't think. But some people do choose to do it because they actually quite like doing it. But on the other hand, they've always got other issues, I think, that we need to help and support them with. So it's a positive, really positive thing, and I'm very pleased with it.
I don't know if I could just sort of say as well, Chair, in that, you know, one of the conversations we had at Scrutiny previously was SWEP didn't actually mean a lot to us. You know, we would actively look to support anybody that approached us, regardless of the weather. You know, SWEP is a very good initiative. However, you know, if you're providing a proactive and all-inclusive homeless service, it shouldn't matter that the temperature's fallen below 0 for 3 nights. You should be able to have the services in place that you can help people that need it. You know, the difficulty is, and has been historically with a lot of the rough sleepers, they've not actually had the right to be given assistance, and that's where SWEP becomes difficult. However, COVID has changed that, and the everybody in approach has really given us an opportunity, and it really is an opportunity to end rough sleeping as we know it in this country, if every authority, you know, takes, I think, the same kind of approach that we have to it.
Mr. Dosad, if only all councils were like Dartford. And unfortunately, they're not, and that's why SWEP, unfortunately, has to be invoked almost in some parts of the world, but not here. Okay, are we happy to move on? Excellent. We will now move to item 9, which is an update on the development of the new housing strategy for Dartford. Jackie, did you want to kick off on this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report in front of you today is an update on the development of a new housing strategy for Dartford. At the last meeting of the board, we discussed the merits of developing a new housing strategy, and it was agreed that we should go forward with this. We also agreed that a draft framework for the strategy should be prepared and presented to the next meeting of the board. So this report includes a draft framework which is in the form of a contents page, and this is attached to Appendix A of the report for the board to consider. As you can see, it's quite comprehensive and includes a range of information which we feel needs to be included to ensure the document covers all aspects of strategic housing, including sort of current legislation, and importantly, the council's vision and priorities for housing going forward. So at the last meeting, we also discussed the timing of the release of the strategy. And since then, we feel that in order for the document to be as current and up to date as possible, that we should defer the publication of the full strategy document until other major pieces of work are completed, which will feed into the strategy and are quite important to the strategy, we feel. Mainly the council's local planning document, and the census, the new 2021 census. And both of these data will be available in 2022. I don't know if Sonia would want to expand on the local plan, but I understand that local authority data, although the full census data won't be available in March 22, local authority data will, so we can use that to inform strategy. So considering this, we've recommended that the full strategy is deferred until then, so we can include the most up-to-date information. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Before we go to questions, does Sonia want to come in on the local plan, or are you happy just to let that ride at this point?
I can update members. As members know, it's going to GAC on Monday on the 1st. That, if members agree that it's sound, that then goes out to Reg 19 consultation, and then following in the summer it goes to examination. So the earliest it's likely to be adopted will be sort of early next year, really spring next year. So yeah, it's 2022. Really. Obviously there's data in the local plan now, but it will be better if it was an adopted document to rely on.
Does anybody else have any other comments on this, on the suggested delay of the report? Personally, I think it's, again, I hate to use the expression again, I use it a lot, it's eminently sensible to possibly do so. It would seem possibly a mistake to produce a document literally just on top of a census. I'm working on census material from 10 years ago when we could be working from new census material relatively soon. It's not a legal document, not a legal requirement, so it's not as if we have a specific timescale to work to, unlike, of course, the local plan. So as a chairman of this, I'm quite happy to see that postponed to a later date so that we can have better information to work a strategy from. But I leave it to the other members of the board as to what their thoughts on that is.
Chairman, I do see where you're coming from with it. You know, we need up-to-date information, and the new census coming forward would be a great help. But to my way of thinking, this housing strategy sort of enhances into some degree our local plan. The two things go together to some degree, I feel. And whilst I could see we want to hang fire a little bit and make sure we've got the best and most accurate up-to-date information to, you know, so the two things work well together, the local plan and our housing needs document strategy in that. We don't want to sort of leave it sort of open-ended, do we? You know, a bit like you putting a date on the mosaic, just, you know, a little while back there at the meeting. We need to sort of, I think get moving a little bit, you know, on this.
I think you're exactly right, Tom. And to be honest with you, now that we've actually, if we've got this, we've got the contents at hand, we've got a framework that we are ultimately going to work to. My concern was that if we start moving before the local plan is officially signed off, we could be working to information that the inspectorate have not authorised. So I'd much sooner work from a document that has been through the various levels of authority and is signed off, and then we have something specific and definite that we won't have to go back and change because it's been, nuances have been changed, etc. But also to bear in mind, of course, that just because we don't actually have a housing strategic housing plan in place doesn't mean that things have stopped. We're still doing all the things that the housing department do, including obviously building new homes, which is a useful link to the next item. But you know, that's the kind of thing we're doing. Entirely understand, Tom, but I think that's the objective of this board, is to make sure that things don't slip beyond the period that they should. But I do. Your points are well made and well understood. Anyone else got anything else at all?
Can I just come in? Sorry, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, Councillor Madison's concerns. What this does, this document, I think it brings together all the work that we're doing currently to support, you know, housing in its widest sense across the service. So, you know, rest assured that the stuff is still happening and will. And the other thing I would say is this is quite a big piece of work. So it will be, you know, the team will effectively start working on it straight away, even if we're looking at perhaps a year away before publication. So kind of just trying to a bit of reassurance. It doesn't mean nothing's happening. It just means it's not going to be pulled together in a fashion where historically you would look at the housing strategy as a document and say, there it is. It takes some time to pull together, but those things are still happening with 100%. And obviously Jackie and the team will lead on getting the document ready as soon as we possibly can. I think the big issue for us is probably the census data, because I think there's every indication that the census data could be considerably different to the last time we did it. So I think it's about right that we get that right. And again, it's still a living strategy. It's still a living document post that, but it's important. I think that the first new version of the strategy is 100% up to date. And, you know, if we're realistic, you know, it won't be if we start to do it before, you know, the early next year. Thank you.
There was one thing you said, Jem, which jarred me a little bit when you said being without a strategy isn't a problem. We have a strategy. This is about the update to it, so it's a new one. So the strategy, effectively, as Peter has said, is a live document and will carry on until we replace it with something. So we're completely strategied up, aren't we? And there's no lack of defence for our housing work through the absence of a strategy. We've got a strategy. It's just a question of when it's sensible to upgrade it. And I mean, the strategy that we implemented last time has been considered by the council to be a really, really good strategy. So actually, there's no particular harm in waiting until we've got all the relevant information. I think it's a perfect combination storm, really, of having a new local plan and new census data. And it would be we could get swept away on two fronts if we're not careful. So I do think it makes sense to get that information in place.
No, thank you. I stand corrected, and I appreciate the clarification. That is, you're absolutely correct. Can I therefore put it to the meeting that we are happy to carry on with the document that we have at the moment, which is basically the contents, but that we do wait until such time as we feel it's appropriate to take this further, i.e. after the actual local plan and census have delivered us the information that we feel would be appropriate to build upon. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. I see no one deferring, so thank you very much. That is the case. Right. So as you almost neatly led into there, Mr. Dosad, our last point is item 10, which is the council new build housing programme. If you would like to give us an idea of where we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read the report. It's essentially an update from the report we presented at the last Strategic Housing Board. I think it, again, provides a positive picture of where we are in terms of our current schemes. The 4 schemes are actively in play. All going well. Gilbert Close is the last of which is still in discussions with the archaeologists about their foundations, which we hope to resolve in the next couple of weeks. And the first element of that project will be the parking reconfiguration at the front of the estate, which hopefully will take all the pressure off when we actually take the rear parking areas away. So there's a little bit of to and fro to go there, but we're hoping to have that resolved pretty soon. In terms of the report, it also talks about our very successful street purchase program, where Jackie has worked really, really hard and achieved, I think, up to 22 units that we've purchased back to be absorbed back into the housing stock by the time we get to the end of the financial year. These are properties that often were former council properties that we've purchased back over a period of time. But again, making a real impact on people that are waiting for accommodation on our waiting list or to be transferred within our stock. So again, a really positive situation. The last part of the report talks about the financial situation, and the street purchase program actually helped us in terms of spending money in terms of the 1-for-1 budget. So again, a positive outcome. We looked like we might have to give some money back to the government at one point, which obviously we didn't want to do. We want to spend that on housing, so we achieved that. And the final part of the report, really, probably not in the report, is about what the next phase might look like. We have a couple of ideas in terms of smaller projects, if I'm honest, but we are running out of housing land, as the committee know. So we're looking at other ideas around talking to developers, see if there's anything we can do in that realm to try to deliver some more, desperately needed social rent accommodation in the borough for our tenants. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Really an observation. Can I say thank you for all the work you're doing at the moment? Thank you, Jackie, for the work you've been doing as well. I know that whenever you start talking about building and developing, especially in places like Swanscombe, this thing can actually upset a few people, even though they were actually living in council houses themselves. No, I think it's excellent, and I think the actions you've taken so far have been exemplary, because I've picked up very little noise in the background with people complaining about what is happening after the initial shock. But when we explained to people they were in fact council houses and that Swanscombe people would be first on the list, all of a sudden it went very quiet. So well done, thank you very much indeed. And I think the communications on that was extremely good as well, which actually managed to go. Councillor Allen, I can see you indicating.
Well, Dave, I'm just sort of thinking on my feet there, and I think that's excellent. I've seen some very good opportunities there, and I'm pleased about it. And I think with the changing situations and things like that, where we're going to have more vacant shop units, would there be an opportunity for the council to invest in perhaps looking at opportunities there for acquiring more accommodation? I'm just thinking that obviously things will never go back as they were, I'm sure of that, and we've got to move forward. And I think maybe there might be some opportunities with some of these former business units as well, like that the council might be able to come into that. That might be a long-term thing, but I'm just came in my head while I was sitting here. Sorry.
I think that's an exceptionally good idea, Councillor. I see Councillor Kite poised, or maybe that's just the.
No, I was going to make exactly the same point, but Councillor Allen got there. Clearly. I train well. So Councillor Allen got there first, but
great minds think alike.
Exactly right. But I think that's absolutely true, and I think there's got the commercial property and retail property, and also I think. If I may say so, we don't want to exploit developer crisis, but there is undoubtedly an issue of developer crisis out there, and perhaps this is part of that arrangement of actually working in collaboration with them for them to make offers of land to us as part of a wider deal, and that might become more familiar, particularly in the retail area, where they've probably got too much retail land on their hands, and in many ways it's fallen into something that we've been very keen on in Dartford. Not always, I have to say, supported by national policy, and officers have been very diligent in reminding us about that. But actually, the idea of a mixed-use retail centre has always been my view. When you visit other countries in Europe, it's quite familiar, even in the heart of villages and towns, to see, 3 shops, then a doorway, then a garage, then a house, then a shop. And I think we are probably going to have to get there as a result of this change in demography. So, I think it's absolutely spot on. I think there are lots of opportunities like that, and they could be quite some very big properties that we own, which have currently got other uses that might fall into our hands. The big issue really is going to be, I don't know whether I might be getting this wrong, but there is an issue about transferring them into the HRA estate, though, isn't there? I mean, there has to be a ready change of money to do that, doesn't there? If they change out of the council's general ownership into HRA, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, it's a technical question. It can be done, and other authorities have done that. Equally, other authorities have rented, that the HRA has rented from the general fund. There's different ways of doing it, Leader. But I think what I wanted to say in terms of the retail stuff, we've always historically struggled with the retail accommodation because of the lack of interest, really, in the often big landlords wanting to be bothered with a piddly little, flat above a shop, particularly in the high street, for example. And now, Councillor Moat will know, our empty property officer has done quite a lot of work to try to interact with some of these big behemoth landlords that own these retail units. But I do wonder, whether or not, COVID will change that situation in terms of just the sheer volume of retail that's going to be available. But again, we have officers in place that can actually pursue those leads if they were to come to fruition. But in answer to Councillor Allen's question, as a housing team, if we have the funds in the 1-for-1 budget, we will actively pursue any opportunity. We've converted the Oast House, for example, in Swanscombe. We've converted a couple of community areas that we attached to the remote schemes. Any opportunity, shops. We looked at Temple Hill Square, wasn't really viable, but those kind of opportunities will always be looked at because we're absolutely keen to convert anything into accommodation that we possibly can, as long as it's viable.
I think it's excellent, and Councillor Kite's training has been exceptionally good, because I've been talking to Mark Haplin about exactly the same thing. I mean, one of the thing that really annoys me is the fact that you can walk down Dartford High Street and you know that 3rd and 4th floors of some shops are completely empty because they operate out of the ground floor. That's the outlet. Upstairs they could do a bit of storage. The next 2 floors are nothing. And it's interesting because I think it was the Dartford Big Living or Big Life. They actually bought a unit there and they've converted right up into the roof, and it's fantastic amount of space. And it was interesting because I know that Councillor Madison was talking about the Mugger facility down at Temple Hill, and there is spaces there that, with a bit of imagination, I'm sure we can take that forward. Anyway, that's fantastic. Do I have anybody else that wants to come in?
I'm
on
just going to ask whether or not Jackie Pye has appeared on Homes Under the Hammer yet. Has she done that yet? Is that's the next milestone? Is it?
Well, you've caught her now. So you can't unmute.
If you're asking, Councillor Kite, whether or not we have yet bought at auction, the answer is yes, we have.
No, but I want to see her on the telly. I want to see her talking to whoever that footballer is about what her plans are for the building.
Oh, I'd be totally useless on the TV.
But it is interesting.
It's one of those things where you'll come back, it'll be 6 months later, you'll come back, and the first words coming out of Jackie Pye's mouth will be, unfortunately, planning got in the way.
But it is interesting because, not that I watch it all the time, but there have been councils appearing on that programme who have picked up quite large buildings and have converted it quite successfully into council facilities. So, Jackie, your opportunity is still there. Don't.
Oh, if you really want me to, I will.
I think it's important. Given this is a public meeting, Chairman, it's important to make clear. I think that our targets on auctions are very, very clear, and we're not going along with a hit and hope approach. I mean, I think that what we're targeting is those properties which are really. I mean, Mr. Doe has got his hand up, so he'll tell me. But we're targeting those products which fit directly back into our estate. So if they're ex-council houses and they are very close to our own configuration and specification, it would make sense. I don't see us speculating on big houses, but I'm sure Mr. Doe has put me right on that.
No, I think breathing reality back into the board. Thank you, Peter. Would you like to take it?
Just to clarify, yes. I mean, the process actually was very bureaucratic, although it was an auction, bizarrely. So we went through our normal valuation processes for that property. We had a report signed off by the strategic director that basically gave me a ceiling that I could then bid to. So it was absolutely done with our usual, bureaucracy is a strong word, but certainly within our governance rules. And actually we were very successful, and I actually bid and won the property on my phone, which was a very bizarre feeling, but very successful. And we got a very, very competitive price for the property that we did buy. And we'd like to do it again, but it has to meet our criteria as the leader mentioned. But yeah, at the moment it's just been single properties, but who knows?
And one of these days we might reimburse you, Peter.
It was my credit card. No, it wasn't.
No, thank
it's a very good. I mean, in all seriousness, I'm sorry to keep going back, but it's an interesting thing, and I think we're right to do it because the property market goes through different trends and sways, and I think auction property, whether it's distressed properties or whether it's speculative, I think is a very good market for us, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be there as long as our governance and our probity is in place, and that was the first step to make sure all that was done properly. But now it is. We shouldn't really fear going into that environment. It's just like buying any other house, really, and in many ways the bargains can be there. So. I think as long as the governance is there, I feel very comfortable with it. It's good. It's good.
No, thank you for the clarification, Mr. Dosad. You should also remember that being on the telephone does not mean you will not then appear on Homes Under the Hammer, because they'll draw you in later. Excellent. Is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up on this particular report? I see no one indicating, and therefore I will say we'll draw it to an end. So we have a date for the next meeting, which is the 7th of April. Could I suggest that, given that today's Bellway presentation was successful, and it was the leader that suggested last time that we actually drew in somebody from the financial world to talk about different financial products that may be available to local people, that we revisit this. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the FCA, Financial Commission, whatever they are, were not happy with sort of supplying somebody. However, would you welcome the opportunity to have a local independent financial advisor talk to us about the various financial opportunities, financial products and opportunities available to local people? We do
if
have
if it's not going to be a representative body, Chairman, I think the safest thing to do is to invite a small panel of them. I mean, I think it'd be sensible to try and invite 3 or 4 local mortgage providers or whatever, so that there's no claim that we're kind of listening to one view and not another. And I think if there's a small panel, I'm sure they'll behave each other together. They'll probably welcome the opportunity to talk to us, and I'm sure it'll be very interesting if there's 3 or 4 of them. So although it's a bit more logistically difficult, I think that might be a bit safer from us in terms of our probity.
No, I think that's it. That's spot on. Is the board happy that we take that, we move with that and see how we get on? If things don't work out, then obviously we can discuss that later. But I will take the first steps to identifying these people if necessary, if everyone's happy with that.
Yeah, that's great. Good idea.
Lovely. All right then. Well, in that case, it just leaves to me to say thank you very much for joining us today and contributing to this board. Thank you all for all the input, and we look forward to seeing it. Well, we'll see you before then, but our next meeting on the 7th. The next big date, I hasten to remind you, is the 5th of February, which is the Mosaic cutoff date. And then Jackie and Peter and I discuss that further. Does anybody else have anything else they want to contribute before we close this meeting down?
Only just to say, Chairman, it's nice to see Tom looking so healthy again. We were all worried about him, so it's nice to see him back and harness and talking the way he normally talks.
It's very kind of you, Jeremy. I'll keep taking the bills.
Yeah, fine.
What people are giving you, Tom. Anyway, okay, thank you very much indeed. I'll wait until everyone's gone, just have a quick word with Alan and Neil. But thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Em.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.